Well, good morning, YouTube. I hope you had a wonderful week with your students. In this week's video, I am talking about something that I have gotten so many questions about, and that is about how I prepare for my observations. This week, I do have a formal observation with our science supervisor, and so what I thought I could do is take you along for the ride, show you how I prepare, give you some tips, especially if you're a new teacher, like what to expect, what it might be like. But it is worth noting that every school follows a different model. So I've worked at schools that followed the Danielson model. I've worked at schools that follow the Strong model. In the particular school that I'm at, we follow the Strong model. I believe it's now called Strong Plus, but basically every different model has a certain rubric associated with it and certain things that the observer is going to be looking for. When you first find out that you're going to be evaluated, typically it is a formal observation. Now, I will say if you're a non-tenured teacher, you may have 2 formal observations and then 1 unannounced observation. As a tenure teacher, I have 1 formal observation and I have 1 unannounced observation. And those things always change. I mean, it's so different at every school, especially again with whatever model and whatever your union has negotiated. So if it's a formal observation, which this one is, basically you know that the observer is coming in. So I received an email asking me when would be the best time to come in, and that's typically what happens with a formal observation. And that's always nice, especially if you have class that you really, really like and you think would do a great job. That is obviously the class that you want to pick. For me, I'm very comfortable teaching any and all classes. So at this point in the year, I really don't have any gripe with the observer coming in any one class. So I would just say the observer is limited by their schedule this year. And this is fine. So they're actually coming into my honors chemistry class. It is during my period 4 or 5. That's a good group of students. So I anticipate it'll go really well. But it is worth noting that I am doing a station set. Now, we've been doing station sets all throughout the school year, but this is a new station set that I've created. So I will be sure to tell the observer that I am doing a brand new lesson, something I haven't done before. As far as when I will tell them, well, one of the things that you will do most likely is sit down to complete a pre-conference. So basically you'll sit down with your observer. In my case, it'll be my supervisor, and I will describe the lesson. We'll talk about the pre-conference record sheet, which I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. And then that lasts anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes. This is something that's required by my district, and this should be completed before the actual observation takes place. And obviously it's just a written record of what you are going to be doing. At my school, we use something called Frontline, and Frontline has basically all of the professional development and our absent management system. We also store our IEPs on this system. I'm not partial either way to Frontline. Frontline's fine. It's just a way for the school to have some record keeping, and this is also where we submit our PD proposals, and this is also where I will see my final summative evaluation at the end of the school year. Now, a pre-conference form is essentially a list of questions that you would need to answer so that the observer knows essentially what they're walking into. So I think it's important for the observer to know that maybe you're starting at the beginning of a unit, so maybe your students don't have a lot of the content knowledge, or if you're at the end of the unit, right, the lessons are going to look very different. Now, because we're in science, obviously we follow the next generation science standards here in New Jersey, so the observer is definitely going to want to see all of those science practices and cross-cutting concepts, and of course, all of those embedded with teaching the DCIs. This is the teacher pre-conference record, and so you can see that there are a series of questions. I've already submitted it, so that's why it kind of looks like this. The formatting doesn't always look the best, but there are a series of 4 questions that I'm asked by the observer, and every single person completes this same exact set of questions. So the first question is to describe the lesson that will be observed. So I created a list of learning targets that my students have already engaged in, and so they will participate in 2 major inquiry activities before the observer comes in for the lesson. Then as we move down here, it's asking about the learning targets addressed by the lesson. So you can see there's a lot of them. So this station set addresses a lot of the learning targets associated with ionic bonding. And these are things that I'm going to be repeating throughout the unit, but their first exposure to this will be during the station set. And that will be something that I will definitely discuss with my observer when I meet with them. One of the other things that they want to know is how are the learning targets communicated to the students? And that's an important thing. So maybe your district wants you to post the learning objective each day. Maybe you have an area on like a Google site or Google Classroom that you will post the student targets. For me, I do have an area on my Google site that posts the learning targets. I also have essential questions that are provided on the individual slides of my station set. So that also communicates what the students need to be able to know and can do. The second question asks about what instructional strategies I'm going to be using over the course of the class period when my observer's in the room. My students are again participating in a station set, so there's lots of different activities that my students are going to be engaging with. So there's manipulatives and computer-based simulation. My students are going to be creating models. So there's a lot of different things. So this is really good because there's a lot of differentiation going on, because these stations actually teach a lot of the same content and there's a lot of overlap. So the students will have the ability to really see the connections between all the stations. Even if it's not apparent when the observer is there, that is something that I'm going to build into our lesson. The third thing that's really important whenever you're planning for your observation is undoubtedly your observer is going to ask about assessment strategies. How do you know that what the students know when they leave the classroom? So in the station set, it's really easy because there are keys next to certain questions. And I've already established a procedure in my classroom where my students will come to me after they finish the station so that I can check their key questions. Another thing that my students are going to do, which will not be observed by the actual observer, is they will participate in an exit ticket, and that'll take place at the end of the station set. And then those results obviously are communicated to the students and imported into our online grading system, multiplied by a factor of 0 so that it does not numerically impact the student's marking period grade. Question 4 is more of a differentiation-based question where it asks, what am I going to do for students who have already obtained the mastery of the learning objective, and what I am doing for the struggling learners who haven't quite gotten there yet? For those struggling learners, I am going to be providing explicit instruction, and that'll be taking place after we do the stations. That'll be taking place during the explain stage, where my students will create a foldable and I will go through the foldable on the overhead, or maybe I might even choose to record a video so that the students can do it a little bit more self-paced. And then for the ones that have already mastered the learning targets, I do have an extra station where I will teach about acid naming and formula writing, and so that'll give them an opportunity to extend or elaborate on the idea, so that buys me a little bit more time to work with those students that are struggling with the content. Now, the pre-conference record can definitely take a lot of time. Now, I'm a veteran teacher, so it took me a little less time, but if you're not really sure what you're teaching, it might be something that you want to ask like a mentor teacher or some sort of lead teacher what they do and how they complete it. For me, I try to give the observer as much information as possible. That way they have a more accurate picture, and ultimately I want to be a better teacher. So I'm looking forward to hearing what the observer thinks about what I've planned, and this is not supposed to be a gotcha. It's supposed to help you and improve your teaching practice. And that's always the way that I look at observations. So I think I'm going to stop here for a moment. I have to go teach my honors chemistry class, but then I'll pop back on here and talk a little bit about what the actual station set looks like and how I'm going to be using it with my students. I thought I would talk to you while I'm doing some laminating. So I am laminating all of the stuff that I'm doing with my station set. Because these stations are new, it does take me a little bit more time to prepare them, but once I have them, and so I don't need to be stressing when I'm trying to do stations next time around. So what I'm going to do is do some laminating for some of the card sorts. So I have a card sort for binary ionic compounds. We're in our union ionic bonding. I think I already told you that. So I have these cards that they're really, I guess I call them placemats. They're basically placemats where my students are going to be matching different cards with them. So I'm going to laminate all of these. So my observation is going to take place on Thursday. I have my pre-conference with my supervisor tomorrow morning at 7:35 during my first period prep. So I am going to talk with them then. They have 15 minutes with me where I'm just going to talk about the lesson and go through like what I hope to accomplish with the students. It should go well, but they're not going to see a whole lot because one of the things that I'm planning on starting with is reviewing the norms for stations. I find that with station time, it gets a little crazy, and one of the things that I always reiterate when I do stations with the students is to read everything. That way you're not held up by waiting for me if you have a question. If you read something, chances are you're going to address your own question by reading it. Now, this particular station set, I'm slightly concerned because there's a game that the students are going to be playing. I'm actually laminating the cards for that right now. And in this game, they have to obviously read the directions for how to play it. If they don't read it, then that's going to cause a big problem, because then I have to spend time obviously talking with them as opposed to like circulating and helping other students. So I think what I'm going to do is just reiterate to them the importance of reading, so that that won't hold me up when I'm trying to check, key questions and help other students. Now, besides preparing for the stations, I also need to prepare a little packet for my observer. So when my supervisor comes in, I want my observer to have, for example, student information. I will take you could take the class list, or I typically will just give them the seating chart, and I will include the students that are in the class so they know exactly who's in the classroom. I also love to include what activities my students are working on, so I'll provide any copies of the activity. So I have like a student record sheet for the station set, so I'm going to be giving the observer a copy of that. And then the other thing that I'm thinking about giving them is a copy of the exit ticket. I may just print it out for them so they kind of know the fact that I'm going to be assessing them and what they're learning from the stations. But basically anything that I'll be referencing over the course of the observation, I want to include in this packet for the observer, because I want them to see the artifacts and the things that my students will be working with to learn the content and skills. And I want my observer to understand that this is a snapshot of what they're going to be seeing in my classroom for 20 some odd minutes. And this is not an indication of like every single thing that I do in my classroom. So I always like to provide for them exactly the things that I'm using in the class so that they have a more complete picture of what's going on. Now, I always get questions about what lessons you should have somebody observe. I would say you should have your observer observe a lesson that you obviously feel comfortable with the content and comfortable teaching it. You want to pick a lesson that the students are actively engaged in, where the students are really the center of attention. They are working on something, they're thinking, they're doing the work. It's not so much you. Obviously, I'm doing a lot of the work up front, but during the station set, the students are going to be doing the majority of the work. And I feel like by doing that, yes, it's a lot of work up front, but I feel like, number one, your observer will see how much effort you put into actually preparing for your lessons. But also, number two, it kind of takes some of the heat off of you, because now you're able to actually engage with the students. And that can kind of take your mind off of the observer, because I know, like, I get nervous. Everybody gets nervous when an observer comes in. So I always like to have some sort of student-centered lesson that my students are engaging in, just to give me a little bit of a reprieve so that I can focus more on them as if the observer isn't even there. For right now, I think I'm going to stop here. I probably won't check in with you until tomorrow morning after my pre-conference to update you how that went. And then, of course, I'll check in with you on Thursday to show you the setup of the stations and how I will be preparing for the observation. Well, good morning, YouTube. I have only a couple of minutes before I head to teach my next class, but I wanted to update you. I did participate in my pre-conference with my supervisor, and when I walked in, I had my pre-conference form up so that I could answer any questions. I wasn't sure if they were going to ask me anything about my lesson, so I just kind of offered some of the things that I wanted the observer to look at. And that's something that I would suggest too. Like, if there's something that you want the observer to comment on or give you some insight or suggestions on, that might be something to talk about in your pre-conference. So anything that you might be concerned about, anything that you feel that you want the observer to know before they come in, these are all things that you want to mention. So it could be something about your student population, it could be something that you're maybe trying for the first time, and that was in fact what I said today. So I said I was doing this set of stations that I created. They're brand new. My students have been doing stations all year long, but this is a brand new set of stations, and one of the things that I really struggle with, and I'm sure we all do, is that students don't read. They do not read what's written down on the page, and so I told the observer that I'd be interested in some feedback and suggestions about how I can improve what I expect of the students during station learning time. I did talk a little bit about the norms and procedures that I've already established with station learning, but that I hope that I can get a little bit more feedback because I know that the observer is in a ton of different classrooms. So I know they could have some tips and tricks for me to improve the aesthetics and like how this is carried out throughout the classroom. And so I'm hopeful that I can get some advice, and I'm hopeful that the students do really well with it tomorrow. So I think for right now, I'm going to end this little vlog here. Tomorrow I will check in with you when I come in the morning, because tomorrow I have a prep period. I'll set up my stations, show you what the stations look like, and then of course I have my observation, and then I'll check in with you after that. So I hope you're doing well. I'll check in with you soon. Good morning, YouTube. The day has finally arrived. It is observation day. So I've been setting up all my stuff pretty much all morning. Today's a little bit more complicated because I'm doing a lab with my second period class today. But I think what's going to happen is the lab, they're going to finish early. So I will have a chance to set up the stations before my next class comes in, which is the one that I'm being observed in. So I'm going to show you right now what the stations look like. I just spent time going through them, making sure everything was nicely prepped and thorough, and I hope you like them. I think they're going to be a big hit. I think the observer's going to be very impressed with them. The first station is an ionic bonding tutorial. So this one's nice because it only requires the station sign and the students just need to scan the QR code in order to access it. So that one's pretty easy. There are questions that go along with it. Every time I do a set of stations with my kids, I always give them a set of questions, and it's basically like a packet and it's divided up among each station. For this one, this is an actual card sorting where they're looking at monatomic versus polyatomic ions and their properties. And then I also introduce how we will show that, we create the formula unit by using alternating positive and negative ions. I like this station because it's cards and it's not computer-based. So I like to include both a mix of computer-based and then non-computer-based type of activities. The majority of these activities are not computer-based today. So that's kind of going to be a little different for them. So the only one they'll really need their Chromebooks for is this first one. The third station is probably my favorite station, where the students are going to play a game. So they can play a game according to these combinations listed on the station sign. So I'm going to show the example. So one student's going to be a metal atom, the other student's going to be a non-metal atom. And what they're going to do is they're going to have to create their electron dot. So they're going to put in all their electrons like so. I bought these little chips off of Amazon. They're on my Amazon favorites list. If you're interested, I'll link it. It actually is already linked down below, but I just purchased them right off of Amazon, and I love them. They're really good for a lot of different things, but definitely making electron dot diagrams. So they've got their electron dot diagrams, and then the rules say that the metal atom must give up all of their electrons to the non-metal atom. So, and then only then can the metal atom be traded in for the ion. And then when the non-metal atom has their all their electrons filled up, then they can trade for their ion. It'll look something like this. Like what this is supposed to do is teach the students how to model, right? And kind of have a simulation of what ionic bonding is actually like. So I love this station. This is going to be a lot of fun for them. And then the final station is a card sort. And this card sort may look familiar, especially if you've done my unit menu training or if you've purchased any of my unit menu products, specifically the ionic bonding one. The only difference with this now is that I actually cut out and laminated the cards for them, and then this is a placemat. So what the students are going to do is they're going to just follow the directions on the placemat, and they're going to be basically making their neutral compounds, right? So they'll see that they fit together, and then they will practice naming them. Okay, and so the cards are all different colors, and so that makes it a little bit easier for the kids to be able to pick out what's what. And then on the back, I'll just show you the back of the placemat. This is where they're going to use these green cards, which look like this. And this is where I'm going to introduce Roman numerals and the meaning of a Roman numeral. So this should also be a pretty fun one, pretty quick one, because the students don't have to cut anything out. The other thing that I want to do before I get going on checking my students' work for their pre-lab is I want to make some copies of things for the observer. So I think I mentioned yesterday, I always provide a copy of any of the activities that my students are engaging in while they're here. I like to include a class list. I'm also going to include my lesson plan from our online lesson plan system. And then I was also thinking about about possibly providing the pre-conference form. So I'll be printing that out and including that as well so that they know that, again, that form was complete. And then all I do is I staple it together and I give it to the observer when they come in. So I'm going to go do that, but I probably won't talk to you until after my observation, but I'll definitely check in with you during my lunch period and let you know how it went. Well, the good news is I forgot that I had a prep period today, and I totally forgot that I had one in the afternoon. So I said to myself, oh, I'll just catch up with you guys then. My observation went very well today. I was very fortunate in that my period 2 students finished the lab early, so I was able to set up the learning stations during period 3 so that they were there in time for my period 4 observation. So it ended up working really well because I also was able to review the norms with my period 2, so it was almost like I was practicing for my period 4-5 class. And yeah, and the kids, they just did so great. There's nothing more that brings me joy than creating something and watching my students use it and have it go so amazingly well. It brings me such great joy to be able to provide activities and resources that helps them to get it, and this station set was no exception. Now, as far as the next step of the observation process, the observer needs to write up the observation. They'll send it to me via Frontline, which is that online system that we use for professional development, and I'll read it over, acknowledge it, and then I will meet with the observer to discuss the observation and the good things, the things that went well, and then we'll also, of course, discuss the things that need to be improved upon. But ultimately, that will be the time that I can just get the feedback that I need to be better, and that's really my goal. So how about you? How did your observation go this year? Did it go well? Did it not go so well? Leave some comments down below because, again, we are better together. If you have some tips or some things that maybe I didn't talk about in this video and you'd like to mention them down below in the comments, I encourage you to do so. As always, I want to thank you so much for being here. I'm thrilled that you're here and I welcome your feedback on this video. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend and I'll be sure to check in with you all very soon.